All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this morning's webinar on employee wellness during COVID-19. My name is Meg Beyer, and I am one of the partners with the Managed Care Technical Assistance Center, also known as MCTAC, and we're working closely with the Office of Mental Health, OMH, on offering these webinars, and we're glad that you all could join us today. I'm going to run through a few logistics for the webinar before we get kicked off, and then I will pass things along to our wonderful OMH presenters shortly. So if you're wondering if you're going to have access to the slides from today, you will. Both the slides and the recording are going to be made available to those who registered for today's webinar. It usually takes our system about 24 to 48 hours to allow the recording to download. So in a couple days, you should be receiving an email that says, here's how to access the slides and the recording. If you want to revisit something that you heard on today's webinar or share this with your colleagues, you will definitely be able to do so. The other thing that we are going to be able to do today is to set aside time at the end of the webinar to answer some questions. So what we're asking you to do is if you have any questions that come up throughout the webinar, you don't have to wait till the end. You can chat them in throughout the webinar. My wonderful colleague, Kevin, who is the MCTAC admin host today, he and I are collecting all of these questions into one consolidated document so that we can ask these towards the end. We are going to try and get through all the questions that come in. We've done quite a few of these wellness webinars over the past few weeks in response to COVID-19, and sometimes we don't get to answer all the questions, but do know that all of the questions do get collected, and we are able to kind of share them with our presenters afterwards in case there's any additional follow-up that we might have to do. So the way that we would encourage you to chat in your questions, if you're familiar with WebEx and looking at your WebEx screen, to look to the right-hand side of your screen, there should be a chat box functionality. We're going to ask that when you chat in your question, you'll see it says the line send to, and then there's a little arrow pointing down on the right-hand side. We ask that you chat in your questions to all the panelists. You'll see that that's an option once you click on that arrow. That way, all the presenters today can see the questions that come in so that we can all be responsive. So with that, I want to thank our wonderful presenter, Dr. Kristen Horan, who will be taking us through the material today. So thank you, Kristen. And I think if you would like to get started, it would be great to hear from you. And I think before we get started, I think, Kevin, if you could unmute Kristen, that'd be great. Thanks.
There we go. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Megan. I just want to thank everybody for attending this WebEx this morning and just taking the time out of your day to join us here. I am going to be talking with you all today about employee wellness during COVID-19. So before I get started with the information, I just want to talk about how we are all affected in some way by everything that's going on. So whether you've been affected by the virus personally yourself, you know someone else who has, or you've been feeling the effects of the virus in other ways, we are all experiencing this in some way. Everyone who faces a disaster or crisis situation is usually affected in some way or another. And usually the responses that we feel are stress and anxiety. And it's important to remember that those are normal reactions to abnormal situations, and that actually after an initial stress response comes on, most people will actually cope effectively and grow stronger as a result. So this is just something to keep in mind as a positive way to reframe your thoughts, when times are getting really tough and really stressful right now, that most people actually do make it out, and they make it out even better and stronger. Aside from stress and anxiety, it's also important to remember that there are a whole other wide range of emotions that people may experience when they're faced with a crisis. So what I want to talk to you now about is when you're feeling all these emotions, the most important thing to do is identify your emotions and allow yourself to experience them without judgment. So some of you might be thinking, well, there are a lot of times where I don't really know what I'm feeling. I can't really put a name to it. Then what? Well, just identify that you're not really feeling yourself and Don't judge yourself for it. Just use your coping skills, whatever those may be, you know, going for a walk, talking to family or friends. Use those to try to help you move through it. And if you find that you're struggling with your coping skills during these times and you need a little extra help, it may be helpful to reach out at this point for more help, and your EAP can actually be a resource for that. They can help you find resources to help you with whatever difficulties you're having. So in general, it's very important right now to maintain our well-being. And there are a lot of things that feel out of our control right now. So we really have to take a good look at our day and really determine what things we do have some control over. So we can maintain a regular schedule for the most part. You know, take a shower every day, get dressed, eat at our meal times. Another important aspect of maintaining well-being right now, if you're caring for a loved one, is to expect and accept interruptions and don't judge them. We may be taking care of someone in person while we're at home, working from home, and we might be getting physically interrupted, or we may be caring for someone remotely while we're at the office and people are at home or wherever they may be, right? We may be getting interrupted by emails and phone calls. Just expect that that's going to happen, accept it, and then just move on. Just know that your workday is not going to be completely conventional, and that's okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is scheduled breaks. We all have breaks built into our regular workday. Now, for whatever reason, sometimes we don't always take those breaks. Now more than ever, it's very important to take these breaks and set aside some time during your workday to engage in an enjoyable activity. It might be chair yoga, deep breathing exercises, going for a walk, calling a colleague or a friend or a family member. If these things seem like they're too time-consuming, you could even do something for a minute or two, you know, depending on what you like to do. Maybe you like to sit by the window and watch, you know, nature, you know, listen to the birds. That's something you can absolutely do. It does not have to be a 5, 10, 15, 20-minute activity. The next area that we can work on maintaining well-being in is healthy eating and sleeping. So a lot of times when we're, you know, facing a stressful situation, we're on the go so much and we can be unfocused and we can just kind of grab and go, right, when it's time to eat. And that can really get us into some unhealthy habits. So it might be helpful to prepare healthy meals and snacks the night before so that we don't fall into these unhealthy habits during these stressful times. We also want to maintain a regular sleep schedule. And something that may help you with sleep, because some people may be having difficulties with sleep right now because of all the stress, engage in meditation before bed to help you decompress from any added stress. And again, this does not have to be a very long, drawn-out activity. It could be something as simple as a minute or two. The next thing I want to talk about is media limits. So it's important to limit checking media related to COVID-19 to 1 time per day and only look at areas of concern for you, so the town you or your family live in or work in. We don't want to overwhelm ourselves with excess information right now. So my next item on the list is practicing gratitude. So this is important always, but especially now. So each day, you actually might want to compose a short list of things that you're grateful for. It might seem like a benign task, but it actually gets our mind off of the stress and anxiety we're feeling, even if it's just for a couple of minutes. You might actually also ask your family members or your coworkers to consider making a positivity mural with you. So you can have people write something on the mural each day that they're grateful for. And actually, this can help remind us of things that we're grateful for and maybe we forgot, you know, during these times of stress. And I think, you know, this is important always. Be kind to yourself and others. Don't overwhelm yourself. Know that you're not going to have balance in every area of your life right now, and that's okay. And be kind to others. People deal with stress in very different ways, so it's important just to remember that, you know, somebody can be experiencing this whole crisis very differently from you, and we don't want to take others' behaviors or ways of managing personally right now. So a sense of community helps decrease stress. Right now, it's kind of a catch-22 because we're being told to socially distance from our community. But that doesn't mean that we need to stop communicating. So we can continue communicating with loved ones and friends. We can use online platforms if that's possible. We can call friends and loved ones. We can write them. But just remember when you do this, remember to talk about things other than the current crisis. This will actually help maintain some sense of normalcy. So thus far, I've talked about managing our own emotions, but the reality is that a lot of us are also trying to manage the emotions of others, so maybe children, other loved ones. So I want to just go over several, key points here. We want to always maintain open communication. So we want to be honest and open about how we're feeling. We want to let others be able to be open and honest how they're feeling, and we want to create a safe space for that. We don't want to judge. We just want to expect and allow for a difference of experience. And we want to also remember that not everyone experiences the same emotion in the same way. So you may be experiencing anxiety as an inability to focus, whereas a child may say that they have a stomachache or a headache. So the next slide, I want to go into some considerations for managers right now. So I think something that's very important, first and foremost, is keeping staff informed. So set up a regular meeting time for updates, and even if there is no new information, keep that meeting time and just let your staff know that. Check in regularly. Make sure that your staff are caring for themselves. They're doing something that involves self-care every day. And thank your staff, because your words are very, very important right now. So managers at some point always come across grief, dealing with grief with their staff, but that might be coming up more now than it ever has. So we want to just be mindful of this. Maybe staff have lost a loved one. Maybe they're feeling, the effects of all this because they're losing connections with people. We just want to make sure that we're mindful that productivity may not be the same right now, and just be supportive and model that it's okay to grieve. And you cannot help other people if you don't help yourself. So make sure that you're touching base with other leadership staff. We want to make sure that you have a solid support network yourself so that you actually have the energy to then support your staff. So that brings me to my last slide, which is coping resources. So I listed a couple of resources here for you. The first one is the New York State Emotional Support Helpline. The phone number is listed here, 1-844-863-9314. And they are available 7 days per week from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. The next point here is a link to a YouTube video of OMH Commissioner Dr. Ann Sullivan's talk on managing anxiety during COVID-19. So that wraps up the portion of the WebEx. We'll open it up for questions now. I hope that you all gained some valuable information, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Kristen. So right now, I know there's usually the question, are these resources going to be available after the webinar? And in case you weren't able to join right at the start of the webinar, yes, we're recording this webinar, and we will make sure the slides and the recording are made available to you. So in the meantime, I am just going to remind folks to use the chat box to send in some of your questions. I don't think we've received any just yet, but we will wait here for a couple minutes to see if any questions come in. So I'm not sure if in the meantime, Dr. Haran, if there's anything else you wanted to share, or any of our panelists, but we'll just wait here for a couple more minutes before folks join via questions.
Okay.
Send us questions.
Thanks, Meg.
Of course. Okay, our first question, someone is wondering if there's any advice for individuals who might already suffer from a mental illness during these challenging times.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think really just keeping in touch with your supports and making sure that you're caring for yourself is really first and foremost. And, that goes for everyone, whether you are dealing with a mental illness or not, just making sure that you have your supports in place and you're taking good care of yourself and reaching out for help when you feel that you need a little more assistance.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So our next question is another great one. What are the signs that we should look for in children as they are coping through this crisis in terms of stress, anxiety?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, anything that's out of the norm for your child, right? So, and even that goes for adults too, right? So anyone that we're caring for right now, anything that seems out of the norm for them, maybe they're usually very talkative and they're becoming very quiet, or maybe they usually have great sleep, right? But now you hear them up roaming around at night, or they're eating more than normal or not eating. Their attitude changes, their emotion is labile, meaning one minute they're happy, the next minute they're in tears, and for seemingly no reason. So anything that starts drifting outside of that norm could be a sign that they're dealing with some anxiety.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm going to wait just a couple more minutes. I want to give folks, I know there's probably a lot to marinate on from what you just went through,
Yeah.
Dr. Haran, so I'll give folks a couple more minutes to kind of chat in more questions. I know we've got the time to kind of spend, and if folks want to just take a few minutes to think about their question and chat it in, we're happy to be on the line. Okay, here's our next question. So I think this question is about isolation and working from home, perhaps, but or maybe just isolation in general. So in having isolation in general, but also having isolation because of having a child with a disability, how do you cope if a supervisor is not having empathy of the additional struggles that are going on at the moment?
Yeah, so that's another good question. These are all good questions. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
I think that being open and honest with your supervisor about what's going on is really important, which I imagine that this individual is doing. But just being open and honest, and just realizing that everyone might not be capable right now of kind of like holding space for us, and maybe people are going through their own difficult times right now, so they're not able to give us that empathy that we need. I'm not sure, obviously, the details of the situation, but just kind of thinking of it in different ways like that. That supervisors are also just people too, right? So they can be struggling as well. So just being open and honest, and then getting that support from anyone else that you have in your life that's very supportive. But it's a very good question.
Thank you. Okay, our next question, can you give any suggestions about how to talk to people who may be feeling overwhelmed with emotion right now?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time, Meg?
Sure. Can you give any suggestions about how to talk to people who may be feeling overwhelmed with emotion?
Yeah, so also a good question. These are all good questions. So I think just letting the individuals know that you're there for them, and it might actually be more listening than talking. So you might actually be telling them that you're there to listen to them and be a support for them, and just kind of letting them vent and get out whatever they need to get out right now. And, of course, be supportive and non-judgmental in whatever they say. And just just ask them how they need support right now and what you can do to offer that.
That's great. I think we're going to pause here for a moment and just see if there are any other questions. I think, you know, Dr. Horan, as you've been saying, these are really thoughtful questions that are coming in. I think everyone is experiencing this crisis and the pandemic differently. So all of these questions kind of just show the broad range of what the experience is like and how people are really trying to be resilient and to cope. So I thank you for all of your questions that continue to come in. Okay, so here is another question. Someone is wondering if you can offer any advice or resources for those individuals who are at home in an abusive or unsafe environment.
Yeah, so I think that if somebody is dealing with this type of situation, it would be very helpful to reach out to the EAP and see what kind of resources are available for you. I don't know, you know, if anyone else on the call has any other additional resources that they know of, but I would suggest reaching out to the EAP and reaching out to your loved ones for support here.
Okay. We'll wait a couple more minutes, see if there's any other questions that come in. All right, I know we're waiting to see if there's any other questions that come in, but I also just want to encourage folks, there's a lot of great resources within the slides that Dr. Horan shared. So once you receive, you know, the slides and the recording, feel free to just quickly pass through, review them, and see if there's anything else that, you know, could be of help to your wellness, your staff's wellness, and, you know, those of you who are part of your life and their wellness, because I think we're all right now kind of focusing, we're all involved in this pandemic environment, and I think wellness is really kind of an area that we can all probably focus on somewhat that will impact all areas of our life. So someone is actually asking if this recording can be passed along to others that may need help. And I know that the recording will be available, so I don't see why not. Kristen, what do you think about that?
I think that, you know, obviously, that, like you said, the recording is available, so, you know, if somebody needs to listen to it, they can, or, you know, if it's somebody with the state and they would like us to do a presentation, we can also do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to just say that we'll take another couple minutes to see if there's any other questions that come in. And then we might end this a little bit early, but, you know, please do chat in your questions. We are here to answer them at the moment. All right, so we do have a question about the New York State Emotional Support Helpline. And Dr. Fran, do you happen to know if the support helpline is confidential if people call in?
You know, I'm so sorry, but I do not know that.
That is okay. We are, I think what, if someone is calling in, you might be able to ask, you know, before I, you know, ask my question, I'd like to know. And I'm sure whomever answers that will have the answer, whether it's confidential or not. I also just wanted to add, I know someone had asked a question earlier about how to support someone who might be, you know, living and working in a home that's unsafe or abusive. And on top of the emotional support hotline that's on this slide, there actually is the New York State Domestic Violence Hotline. And that can be found if you can simply Google NYSDV hotline or New York State Domestic Violence Hotline. I know that that can also be a resource for folks who are experiencing that directly or folks who are looking to support someone who might be experiencing that. And that's the New York State Domestic Violence Hotline. Okay, here's another question. How might, Dr. Fran, how might you handle a family member that doesn't perceive the pandemic as serious as you do? You know, for example, they don't take the precautions like wearing a mask or perhaps social distancing. How do you handle that?
Yeah, so that's difficult. I'm going to first assume that the family member lives in the home. So if they live in the home, you know, it's difficult, but I would just be very open about why it's concerning to you. You know, really talk with them about how it's making you feel. And then just, I guess, you know, what I could say is focus on your self-care. Try to go back to what I said in the slides about, you know, everyone is going to have a different, well, I don't want to generalize. Some people are going to have a different view on all of this than we are. So keeping that in mind, you know, in the midst of however this makes you feel, whether it's anxious or angry, it might not help that much in the moment to kind of think like, oh, everyone has a different viewpoint on this. But, you know, I would say just really, really have a discussion with this individual or individuals about how it's making you feel. If the family member lives outside of the home, I think what I would say is just keep your self-care in mind, you know, and whether that involves not seeing them, if they're not taking precautions, whatever the case may be, just keep your self-care in mind. And I hope that helps. I don't know if I really offered much, but.
I think that's a very real, struggle folks are dealing with, right? Like, I think a lot of people it's challenging to live during these pandemic times and feel that, we're on lockdown, we're on quarantine, we're social distancing, and we're trying to keep ourselves safe. But at the same time,
right.
our loved ones might feel differently. And,
right. And,
yeah.
Yeah. So I think too, if the family member is in the home and there's a space to be, separate from them, that might be something too that you consider, or maybe you don't have the family member prepare meals or things like that, to kind of give yourself some extra protection there.
Exactly. Oh, and I want to let everyone know, I think Dr. Meath also chatted this out to everyone, but it does say, according to the Office of Mental Health website, OMH, the emotional support helpline is confidential. So we can confirm that that's confidential.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Meath.
So someone is wondering, Dr. Horan, if you'll be doing any wellness programs related to nutrition and promoting exercise techniques to help relieve stress.
So we don't have any of that on the docket right now.
And if people were interested,
is that
something, could they follow up with you directly, or?
I think that they can reach out to the general email that we provided in one of the prior WebEx, for people who want to set up a presentation.
Okay.
I don't recall off the top of my head what the email was.
Okay.
But we can probably get back to them on that.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. So this is kind of our just gentle reminder that our time is winding down. So if you do have any questions, please chat them in. And in the meantime, Dr. Horan, I just want to let you know we've also received comments on top of questions. And the general comment theme has been, thank you very much. This information is needed and appreciated. So I just wanted to relay that to you as well.
Well, thank you. And you are all very welcome. It's my pleasure.
Okay, so I'm going to give folks this maybe another 2 minutes or so to chat in some more questions. And if we don't receive any questions, then we may end this, but just do know that you will be receiving all of the slides and the recording in the forthcoming days. So you'll have access to these resources and information. Okay. We haven't received any other questions. So at this time, I want to thank everyone who joined, everyone who participated in this and sent us questions. And in particular, I want to thank Dr. Haran, who really guided us through these tips and thoughts around wellness and how to stay well during this most unprecedented time. So Dr. Haran, was there anything else you'd like to share?
No, I just again want to thank everyone and thank you, Meg, for all of your assistance throughout this. And I really hope that you all are able to really get the support you need, engage in the self-care that you need, and stay well.
Thank you. All right, take good care, everyone.